Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Ernst. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Slap5, and welcome today. This is our second in our series of webinars that's based on the Roundtable for Customer Revolution, which was a very interesting event that Bill Lee and I put on, and Nick Mehta from Gainsight was one of the participants in that. I'm going to let Bill summarize what that was all about and why that led to this topic today of really wanting to drill into the intersection of customer marketing and customer success and why that's so important and what you people on both sides need to be doing in order to bring that relationship to life and really make a big impact on your company. Before I do that, let me just, again, I'm really excited about this event today because I think about Nick and Tyler and Gainsight. I mean, they've pretty much defined the customer success function. And, Bill Lee and I are working together to pretty much to redefine the customer marketing function because it's been around a lot longer, but it's also never had the respect that it deserves. And for a lot of reasons, which we're going to dive into today. And we've got some prescriptions for how to really elevate your game on the customer marketing side, but you can't really do it without the help of customer success. One thing I just want to, another housekeeping note though, this is not just going to be a one and done event. What we're going to do coming out of this event, we're going to be doing a survey of the people here that attended as well as others that couldn't attend today, because we're doing some primary research on this topic of the intersection of customer success and customer marketing. And we want to find out from you, what are you confirming what the biggest challenges are, as well as what are the things that you're trying to do about it today. And then we're going to publish a report summarizing what your peers are doing well and what your peers are doing that they find is not working well. So it'd be very useful research. With that, let me turn it over to Bill. Bill, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about the Roundtable and how that led us to where we are today.
Happy to do so. Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all to our webinar, which is about customer marketing plus customer success is poised to eat the world. That's what we're going to be talking about. And we are pumped to have our special guests this morning. I'll introduce them in a second. First, I want to give you an idea, a quick overview of what spawned all this. We've done, this is our second webinar. We've got a website coming. We've got much more information coming from the Roundtable for a Customer Revolution. And this is a meeting of a super group of C-level executives and board directors talking about the customer revolution with a huge appetite for changing it dramatically, for revolutionizing it. So if they're as savvy as these people are, as experienced as they are, as savvy as they are about customer relationships, this is very intriguing when it comes to the future of the work that all of you all are doing. So the first roundtable was the roundtables consisted of 3 main meetings that we started with, weekly meetings, 1 hour each, plus about 6 more hours of other related conversations that we had within this group. It was incredible learning. We're going to be publishing and putting out all kinds of information about that as time goes on, including in this webinar. And I want to start with the most important finding, the major finding and point that was made in the roundtables, and that is this: most companies are not coming close to realizing the immense potential of their customers to grow the business. Most firms aren't coming close to realizing that potential. And that's not like to blame somebody or say it's anybody's fault. What that connotes is huge potential here for everybody on this call. And of course, when we're talking about this potential, we're talking about 6 customers that some of you have, well, all of you really, have helped to make successful, and then bring them into activities like evangelism, advocacy, bringing them onto your advisory boards and so forth, which we generally call customer marketing. So why is it that we're going to talk about what that potential is, but why is it that they're not reaching that potential? And this is going to be my lead-off question for Nick. So before I really pose this question to you to start us off, Nick, I should probably introduce you and Tyler.
Sounds great.
I've got a fan out there somewhere. So Nick Mehta, most of you know him. He's the CEO of Gainsight, the not customer success, the customer success company. He's a 5-time Forbes Cloud 100 recipient. I've got all these accolades that Nick has achieved, well deserved. I can read all of them. I don't want Nick to get a big head here. There's one that I will mention that was a surprise to me. He was recently rated the #1 CEO in the world. Number one in all the world. He finally had to fess up. It was his mom who was on the awards committee, and that was it. So he's also written 2 books that are extraordinary. I highly recommend both of them. And so it's fantastic, Nick, to have you. Welcome.
Awesome. Great to be here, Bill. Thanks so much. Yeah, my mom, she may have rigged that one. So, but I'll take anything I can get.
And then Tyler McNally is Gainsight's SVP of Customer Experience and Customer Ops. He leads Gainsight's customer success strategy, operations, and scale teams, working closely with success, support, sales, and product leadership. That's kind of a menu that the customer success folks here, I'm sure, will recognize and resonate with. Key initiatives under his current charter include launching and expanding the Gainsight end-to-end value realization program, which is the product success collaboration that's critical to customer success, and also admin experience programs. Previously, Tyler led customer success for 5 CS teams of Gainsight, spanning SMB, mid-market, and enterprise across Gainsight's 2 platforms. Deeply experienced, he's obviously a great choice for Gainsight. At home, Tyler is pleasantly surprised every day he's learning to be the father of 2 girls, having come from a family in which he was the oldest of 4 boys. Figure that one out. All right, Nick and Tyler, get ready for this.
Sounds great.
Excellent.
All right, the reason why customer marketing is not getting the respect it deserves, and we'll talk in the conversation why they deserve huge chops, huge respect. But the reason they're not getting it, and I've been in this field for 20 years. I would say I doubt there's anybody that knows it better or more deeply than I do. We've done research, we've done consulting with them, we've done events and so forth. And the reason can be boiled down pretty much into 2 things. And that is that they're stuck in silos. Generally, they report they're in, say, marketing or their sales, and sometimes further down than that, like in demand gen. You've got the best customers your company produces, the successful ones that can communicate their success to your market, and you're putting them down in these silos where they have no clear impact. And so they wind up doing stuck in low priority initiatives, and they're producing happy talk case studies nobody reads and so forth. That can happen, and so forth. And when we were talking and as a result, by the way, of not being able to establish clear impact on the business, they struggled to get budget. So my question, Nick, is customer success went through the same journey. There was a time when customer success managers couldn't get respect, and they were complaining about this. And so you changed that. You were probably the force most responsible for changing that. Tell us about that, and what lessons does that have for our customer marketing attendees this morning?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And I think there is definitely a parallel. And actually, these 2 things are so linked together, as you said in the title of the talk. I think that the first thing to say is, I think we helped change it, but I think what changed it is really the underlying conditions, the 2 things, right? One was the business model required a change, right? So, and you know this, Bill, from like the old days when customers didn't have a lot of power to this new world where customers have so much power. And so therefore you got to keep and grow your existing customers. That's why customer success became so important. And I'd argue that's why customer marketing is going to become more important. So there was an underlying business model change. That's like the first thing. We could have thrown all the conferences we wanted. We could have done all the music videos we wanted. If the business model change wasn't there, none of this would have happened. Second thing is there obviously had to be an incredibly talented group of people that would step up to the charge, right? And that would actually be open to evolving and growing into these customer success roles, right? And that's showed up as some people that have been doing customer success for a long time, stepping up and growing. And then some people who got into the field for the first time as part of this kind of gold rush. So those two things we can kind of map to customer marketing, because the business model change is driving a need for customer success, but we'll probably talk about driving a need for customer marketing. And this incredible group of people has a chance to step up. But I'd argue you got to step up. It's really changed what it means to be a customer success person a few years ago versus now. It's not just that they're getting more respect, they're earning more respect by changing the way they talk, changing the way they operate, changing the way they connect their goals to the company goals, things like that. And then we, Gainsight had a small effect, get people together and fan the flames, write blog posts. But those two things, I think, were the core things that really drove it. Tyler, what would you add?
I think you hit on them, and I want to double click on the CSMs or CS function rising to the challenge of, I think early days with CS, it was we need somebody who can talk to the customer and be there, be a little bit more proactive. Then it was not just showing up for meetings. How do we get the CSM to help a customer drive adoption? Okay, great. But that's not sufficient either, ultimately, because the business model's changed. It's about, have they achieved their outcomes? And now the CSM is starting to be more accountable to not just are they meeting with you, not just are they using the product, but are they achieving their goal, which sets up a future commercial event. And that's way more in the commercial structure than I think CSMs have been before when we were just getting started.
Yeah, one point I'd make to double down on that, Tyler, is I think it came down a little bit to the question about when somebody says, oh gosh, my job is changing all the time, is that exciting or is that scary? And I think when you're in this world of like new opportunity, it should be exciting. So I think the CS leaders that have stepped up are like, oh gosh, my job's changing all the time. It's exciting. It used to be about, as you said, Tyler, supporting the customers, then being a little more proactive, driving adoption, then outcomes, now revenue. So I think it has to be exciting. The second thing is, I think when people step up, they get more accountability too. It's not just you get more responsibility and more limelight, you get more accountability. And I think the CS leaders that have like really stepped up are excited to be responsible for a number, are excited to be like accountable. And when they miss it, are excited to own up to that, right? So that's kind of there's always two sides to everything, right? It's cool to have a seat at the table, get more limelight, but you're going to get more scrutiny too. And hopefully that excites everyone because you get a chance to step up.
And Nick, I wanted to see if you would agree that that business model change that you talked about, that really spurred one of the dynamics that spurred the real need for customer success to step up and be more important, have a bigger role. Right. That's also applies to customer marketing, right? The fact that we need to grow and keep customers. I mean, customer marketing really needs to think of their role as not just producing these pretty case studies and things like that, but in getting G2 reviews, but also driving programs that are helping grow and keep customers. And so, and then on top of that, add the dynamic, another industry dynamic is that the trust gap that exists in the market between buyers and sellers keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. And so customer marketing has to play a strong role in helping bridge that trust gap by showcasing that customer success. So would you agree that it's the same dynamic that customer marketers is giving them, it's opening the door for them?
Yeah, totally. If TSIA, this organization that focuses on kind of the post-sales journey, came up with this framework a long time ago called land, adopt, expand, renew, right? Which is, most people know that. And, customer marketing historically focused, or now PIMO, if somebody's really paying attention, they evolved it a little bit. Customer marketing historically focused on the land, right? And I think that's more important than ever. But like you said, it's not just about pretty case studies, right? It's actually really about getting potential customers connected with people and use cases that are relevant to them. And that's, virtual happy hours and peer-to-peer forums and mentoring and all that. So there's more and more need for customer marketing on the land side. And frankly, the customer isn't buying any other way than through advocacy, right? Like that's like, I don't know, Tyler, in our business, it's like 100% of our customers buy Gainsight because they used it before, or they know somebody used it, or whatever, or something like that, right? And so it's the only way to sell. But like you said, Jeff, it's also an important asset in adoption, expansion, and renewal. Because if you think of those three use cases, when you're adopting, you're still kind of selling the customer. You're selling them in a different way. You're selling them on what more they could be doing with the product. What's the best way to do that? Let me show you another customer that's using this new feature, right? When you're trying to expand a customer, the customer wants to know about somebody that's done this before. When you're trying to renew them, sometimes it's because they're not getting enough value and you want to have them talk to somebody who is getting value. So customer advocacy is the superpower through the whole land, adopt, expand, renew funnel. And, Tyler, we're investing a lot in this internally. What we got? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in there because what you described, I think, is where customer success and customer marketing need to go, which is strategic across the life cycle, not transactional. Hey, we got a promoter score, go create a case study from this. And then hopefully someone uses that case study. So what we've been doing at Gainsight, and I want to share, so advocacy is now part of my organization, but it's had a journey over the course of the years at Gainsight. It started in marketing. We moved it into CS. A couple of years ago, we moved it back into marketing. And now I am happy to say we are not just moving it back into CS, but we're rethinking how marketing and CS need to work together on this. So I had an awesome conversation. We have a new CMO and we sat down together, and from completely different perspectives, we had the same conclusion, which is she's got the team that really understands how to create great experiences for advocates or produce high quality content related to advocacy. But she doesn't always know where to slot that in the life cycle. When would that be valuable for somebody going through a renewal or going through onboarding? And so what the CS team has are those relationships and an understanding of the life cycle and where a customer is. And then they can bring customer marketing in to be really impactful across each stage. So how do we actually make that real? We're laying out our life cycle and saying, starting in the sales process, what are the 4 different types of advocacy we want to bring to the table, and when in the sales process? When is a reference helpful to somebody versus a case study? Yeah. Another example would be you're a brand new customer. How do we connect you with somebody who's perhaps 6 to 12 months down the line from you? Mm-hmm. To help you see, okay, you're really in the thick of it now, but I was in your shoes before, and here's what's going to happen next. And there's another piece in there too, which is the people side of it. And I think we tend to think of it too much as transactional, but it's individuals connecting to individuals. And there has to be something in it. People want to help each other, but you have to show them how to do it. And so I think it can feel really transactional if it's like, hey, could you do this case study? Could you talk to this person? And the next time I talk to you is the next time we need something from you. How do you make sure that that's not the only time you're going back to those advocates is when you need something from them?
So let me, very interesting remarks from both of you. Let me make a couple of observations here. My thinking and my feeling is that if you look at customer advocacy, broader customer marketing in general, as a quid pro quo, you do something for me, I'll do something for you. I think that's an inefficient way to run these programs. What I find is that many of the customer marketing folks get very skilled at making these advocacy requests more along the lines of offering that are very much in the customer advocate's interest in terms of building her career, building her network, and so forth. So that's just one observation there. Don't look at this. I think it's a mistake to look at this as a quid pro quo thing. That gets down into a less healthy relationship. But the what you're laying out, Tyler, I think is spot on. Is to not just align with strategy, but actually, it sounds like what you're doing is recruiting, is engaging, not really recruiting, but engaging these customers to drive the customer, the company's business success.
And we're building this foundation where we already know we're going to go, is thinking about advocate health and thinking about the journey of an advocate. It starts with a very small request. You have a great experience with the product. Perhaps it's a quote, perhaps it's just an NPS comment, but you shared that you're having a great experience. How do we help you develop as an advocate? Not as what you're giving us, but An advocate is someone who is getting value from the relationship with a business, getting value with the relationship with the people in the business. So how do we do more of that? We're thinking in terms of a ladder. It starts with a small request. Then perhaps we have a mentoring program or a networking program. Would you like to be connected there? You can get value from it, and here's how it helps other people. With increasing asks over time, and then we can get a sense, what kind of advocate is this person? What we have discovered too is some advocates are really good at certain types of advocacy, and they really only want to focus on that. They don't want to be on a camera, but they are happy to give a quote, or they're happy to do a one-on-one phone call.
Right. I mean, somewhere along the line, they're going to be, maybe they don't want to necessarily get in front of the camera. Maybe they're not into building their profile in their industry, but they like to connect with their peers. So communities becomes a really attractive option to them, and so forth. So I think all that's dead on. So I think a lot of folks here realize this. So 2 questions again on the customer marketing side for now. How do they encourage 2 things? How do they encourage this sort of relationship with their customer success teams? Number 1, and number 2, ultimately, how do they get that recognition at the C level?
I think I'll flip those, because I think the answer to the second one helps answer the first one, which is the C level is the attribution piece.
Yeah.
So I think this is something too that marketing is traditionally very good at. You run campaigns, you need to attribute success against those campaigns. So making sure it's clear, these are the advocacy events we do, and here's where it's influencing pipeline, for example, or here's where it's influencing a customer that was at risk. You can show the value of using advocates to bring an at-risk customer back. That's a C-level comment, that's a C-level data point, and that's going to help the CSM say, oh, I can see how customer advocacy is way more than a nice quote when they leave a positive NPS. And so there's that strategic role of bringing in an advocate to help a CSM working with a customer ultimately drives the business outcome.
One thing I'd add in on the sales side, Bill, like whether it's a new or expansion, I think that kind of what Tyler said, which sales there's a journey, a life cycle, right? And typically you're trying to get the buyer through some set of thought processes, like for example, why do I need to do anything? Why should I do something now? Why is Gainsight the right choice, or whatever your vendor is the right choice, right? And I think that if you can tie your advocacy actions into the sales journey more, right? Versus just, we have a case study, right? That's fine, having a case study, but it's like I'll use the Gainsight as an example. One of the things that companies have to do to get ready for Gainsight is kind of figure out their data strategy, right? And so that's a very common thing. And sometimes companies take a long time to figure out their data strategy. And we have a lot of customers who figured out their data strategy. How awesome it would be to get one of those customers on a virtual Zoom with 5 prospects thinking about their data strategy. And so then you've helped advance those 5 prospects through the sales cycle. So thinking about what you do as moving clients through the sales stages, that's at least a good mental model for showing the value of what you do.
Well, why not the entire customer journey?
Exactly. The whole customer journey. Yeah. And I'm thinking that if you said, what's the part that will resonate with the average CEO? It's like showing how it moves somebody through the sales cycles, right? Including, by the way, expansion cycle, renewal cycle, but tying it to like some revenue outcome will really just resonate more with people, I think.
Right.
Drilling into that. So Tyler, you mentioned about how important it is with your team, how you're really understanding the life cycle and pulling customer marketing in. Speaking for my peeps, which are the customer marketers out there, my clients, one of the things that they're telling me that goes on in a lot of companies is there is some friction or a gap between the 2 teams, that they're not able to work as closely together as they need to, which is really what we're trying to tackle today with this topic. And one of the things I'm hearing is, the customer marketers, they're chartered with running these programs, mobilizing customers. They know they want to do it and make it a 2-way exchange of value, where there's tremendous value, even more value to the customer in building their career and showcasing their thought leadership and building their reputation. But a lot of times the customer success people that they're dealing with are chartered with kind of protecting the customers and keeping anybody in the company from talking to them or interacting with them. And so they don't always realize that the program that we're offering is not a burden to the customers. It's actually helping them build their career. So I wanted to talk about how do we bridge that gap, and like, how are you doing it at Gainsight, and what do you advise Gainsight CSM clients and their leaders to like open the doors and be receptive and recognize the power and potential of the two teams working close together?
Yeah. I think I think part of this human nature. People that are drawn to want to be a CSM, they want to help, they want to be a trusted advisor. In some cases, they want to protect. They want to make sure things go really well, and
Right.
they feel the need to orchestrate every aspect of the experience. Maybe that's the right way for your highest touch customers, where there's lots of complexity and you want to deliver that, Uber white glove service. But for the rest, that's probably not going to be possible. And so I think what's important is that customer marketing, how do you show the what's in it for me for the CSM to say, this is not about, I'm going to be purposely provocative. This is not about putting an account at risk or annoying a customer. You bring value. And I think when I see these cross-functional challenges, it's bringing it back up to what's the customer experience we're trying to deliver, because that's driving some financial outcome. And then what are the responsibilities of both people or both functions to do that? Often there's a disconnect in whether you use a RACI or some kind of role description, and people don't understand the what's in it for them.
Mm-hmm.
When you can show to a CSM, like tell them a story of, here was a customer that was at risk. We brought in an advocate, and it helped this at-risk customer see how they could get out of the situation they're in. That helps a CSM. CSMs are always struggling in those situations where you have this risky customer, and how do you help them take the next step? A customer can be so much more impactful in that situation, and that's an asset to the CSM. But if they don't
Right.
see that as an example, and I'm doing
Right.
that on the same side with sales, I have to show sales how advocates are helping them in the sales process and not slowing down their steps to close the deal.
And don't you think it makes the CSM a rock star when their clients become rock stars and their
Totally.
success becomes showcased, and not only within your organization,
Absolutely.
but within their career?
Yeah, I mean, it's
And
interesting.
yeah, go ahead.
You finish, Tyler. I'll add some stuff.
I would say that that recognition part, and it further elevates the CSM as being this trusted advisor that is bringing valuable opportunities back to the customer.
Totally agree. And two things I'd add in on this. On your point, Jeff and Tyler, about kind of making the CSM rock star, making the customer feel like a rock star. I think that is the non-intuitive thing that happens, because it feels like, oh, we're asking them to do something. But actually, when they get to do it, the customer feels really proud, and actually, you all get this, right? Like, all of you have gotten an email from somebody asking for advice, every one of you, right? And I'm sure hopefully most of you have done calls with people for advice. And the person says, thank you so much. But many times you're like, no, I actually enjoyed this too, because I got
Right.
to rethink, what I mean? Like, everyone likes helping other people. It's like a very human thing. And so I think the first thing is just realizing it's not just a give, it's a get. Second thing, I think very practically is, I think the CSM, one challenge they have, putting aside other stuff, is they have a fixed amount of mind share they have with the client, right? So most CSMs have something they're trying to get the client to do, get them to adopt this thing, get them to do schedule an EBR, get them to do, get through onboarding, right? And so one thing the CSM is protecting is their mind share. When you go into a meeting, you can't be like, I've got 17 things I need you to do. You generally have like, I've got 2 things I need to do. And so the challenge for the customer marketing team is sometimes you're not always the top 2 priorities for the CSM with the customer. So how do you solve that? Well, one is obviously you get convinced the CSM to make it a top priority. But the other way, actually, I think there's value in other people going and asking the customer, not the CSM. Now, you want to make sure the CSM knows about it. You don't want to blindside them. But I don't think funneling everything through the CSM is the right approach. There's this concept in sales of second voice. The idea is basically what, sales reps talking to a customer. It's helpful when the manager reaches out to the customer and you get different conversation. The manager can ask different things. Salespeople do it all the time. So I think it's actually not crazy for customer marketing people with CSM permission to actually reach out to the customer and say, hey, I connected with, Sally, your CSM, but I want to reach out about this. And I think that's actually good for everyone. So don't feel like you always have to be behind the scenes, is my 2 cents.
And that's such a good point. Because
I mean,
let me just add, Bill, because whenever I'm working with my clients to kind of bridge this gap and bring it to the CSMs or even to sales or account management or whoever it is that might be trying to protect that mind share or protect the interests or keep us from overburdening customers, what always happens is once we do get through that and break it and introduce it to the customers and offer them these amazing opportunities to engage, they're like, why didn't you ask me this sooner? Or why didn't you bring this to me sooner?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, and then the people that were putting up the walls are like, I thought you would not like this, right? And so it's amazing how oftentimes they realize, yes, and so a lot of times what I help my clients do is we have a lot of messaging that we help them frame what the program is for the customers, because they do not always intuitively, like I think advocacy has a bad rap where it's always been thought of as do us favors. We're begging for favors from our most loyal customers, as opposed to we're running this program that's a two-way exchange of value. And so that's I think that's a huge observation. Go ahead, Bill.
That's definitely a wall, an unnecessary wall that gets in between these kinds of relationships with CSMs and with customer marketing and sales and so forth. That wall is totally unnecessary. Nick, I want to go back to your point about building relationships. Back to the customer marketing folks, building relationships with their customer success groups and so forth. I want to talk about going a step further and developing relationships with the C-suite. I don't think customer marketing belongs being part of customer success. I think they should be, I'll put this out, consider making them an independent group that works closely with on an equal basis. But the reason being so that they can develop relationships directly with the CEO and with other C-level executives. And the reason I say, and of course the question then becomes, well, what do you got? What has customer marketing got that would make me, you're talking about their priorities and 17 priorities they're not going to juggle. How do they get on their number one or two priority? So we've done during the roundtable, we've created what we're calling a crush list. And what we did is we didn't start with activities that customer marketing and customer success normally do. What we started with was CEO priorities, strategic priorities that are keeping them up at night. Things like, acquisition, things you've mentioned, already several times, but, renewals, retention, acquisition, maybe cost for some people. Maybe they're going through a rebranding. That can get way up there if it's a tough rebrand and so forth. So we took about 10 or 12, we've taken about 12 or 14 of those that are on just about everybody's top priority in the C-suite. And then we started looking for case studies or use cases where customers were brought in directly, not through a silo, not through marketing, not through sales. They were brought in directly to address this tough priority. And what we're finding is we've got at this point dozens of examples of customers that are doing this for their C-suites. Quick example that resonated. I think this was after you couldn't attend the roundtable, Nick. But one was a customer advocacy manager. The president of the division was in the senior leadership were freaked out about retention rates. They were suddenly falling, and they were planning this big, expensive marketing campaign that may or may not have worked. And he suggested, why don't we bring our customer champions into this effort directly? And real briefly, what they did was they kind of went crazy. There was like 50 of these customer champions. They organized 20 events in 13 cities around. This is the Canadian vision of this firm, around the country. They lined up speakers. They put on webinars that eventually got up to 5,000 listeners and so forth. They went just totally crazy right at this problem, retention rates fully restored. And I've seen many of these, Jeff and I have now seen many of these instances where customer marketing goes straight at that high level priority that's keeping the C-suite up at night. My question here is, given that that is true, given if enough companies with enough customers are doing this, how do we turn this into into kind of an entree to the C-suite to say, hey, look at this too?
I can, Bill, I can start if you want. Is that be good? You want me to go?
Yes.
Yeah. First
Yes.
of all, I always laugh when people say C-suite, because I guess that means like the executive suite in an office, but I'm like in our kids' playroom right now. So I don't exactly know what the C-suite is anymore. Maybe we can have a separate discussion about that. There's some
state of mind.
It's not just a joke though, because I think that it's funny. Everyone that's not in the C-suite talks about the C-suite, and people in the C-suite never talk about it. It's not a thing. So I actually, first of all, would like remove that from your vocabulary. Second of all, I would say it's not about like who you report to. It's about the way you communicate. It's really just about what you talk about and how you describe the value of what you do. It's not realistic to have every single group in the company report to the CEO directly, right? Although at Gainsight, I have probably too many direct reports, so I'm kind of trying that. But it's not. It's actually more about when you get those shots in front of the executives, what are you saying, right? So like you're doing an update to executives, and like old world is, let me show you the case studies we did, right? Which is fine, right? But that's definitely gets you relegated into the, okay, that's a fine tactical role. New world is, okay, we closed these deals we closed this much AR last quarter, and we, out of that AR, we helped move it from stage X to Y, this percentage of the AR from stage X to Y through advocacy events. We created this program that drove, 100 new SQLs into the funnel. These top 10 deals, let me tell you the story of how advocacy helped in these deals, right? Things like that. So whenever I say presenting to executives, to me, there's two things you want. You want numbers and you want stories. The story should be about big deals that everyone knows, and the number should be about deals. Again, I wouldn't even I care a ton about the customer journey. I wouldn't even use that term if for the average CEO, right? I would use, how is this helping drive revenue? And it is, right? It is driving revenue, like the way you just said it, Bill. Like, by the way, renewal revenue counts, expansion revenue counts, land revenue counts. How is this helping drive revenue? And you're driving revenue, you're just not necessarily getting credit for it, would be my 2 cents. Tyler, how about you?
I was gonna share my screen, but I don't think I have permission to just show one screenshot of what it would look like for, I think C-suite is more the mentality and the fact that it starts with metrics. Okay, what are the metrics you're trying to improve, and what have the activities done? And then the stories support the metrics and cause people to lean in. I think the easiest way to do it early on is, a lot of companies, Gainsight included, we have decided that references are so valuable and advocacy is so valuable in sales. We have specific requirements, and then we can attach those events to the opportunity. So now we can associate, these are the advocacy events that drove these opportunities and the dollar value of those opportunities.
So Jeff, I'll bring you in on this. Is that something that lots of customer marketing organizations try to do? But
yes, it's the holy grail. It's the holy grail of customer marketing, is to be able to do that. Right?
They go through all through machinations to do this. I think it's one of those things that's easier said than done.
What I would say though, I would jump in, which is, I think this happens quite a bit, not just in customer marketing, but when the calculating the attribution is hard, we tend to steer away from it. And then we focus on the activities. So we can say, look at all the case studies we did. And it's something I think about a lot with my team, which is a lot of ops people, where we have to attribute success on everything we do. So we start with, when we have a project, what's the metric we're looking at? And how are we going to measure that? And if we don't have a way to measure it, we try to do the hard work up front to find a way to measure. So we don't get to the end with 100 case studies and realize, oh, our systems are not going to work together to define what the impact was. It's hard work to do up front, but that brings it up, I think, to the C-suite mentality.
And Nick, as a CEO yourself, when you do get systems combined like this, do these measures actually persuade you
Yeah. So for me, like I was alluding to, persuasion comes through like the heart. Well, you know, if you go back to the original Greek speaking, right? Logos, ethos, pathos, right? So I think that you want to hit each of those. So you want to actually hit the person's data, right? So that's the metrics. And that's where I think you really want to be able to say, this is how much revenue we move from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 2 to stage 3, and we were involved in that. To me, that would be the ultimate. And then you want to hit the people's feelings, and that's where you want to actually talk about stories. So we closed 5 big deals last quarter, 10 big deals. Let me show you how advocacy was involved in each of these. Most senior executives were involved in those big deals. And then I think the third is you appeal to your credibility, which is, let me tell you how other companies are doing this. That's very powerful, right? Those are the 3 fundamental ways to advocate for anything: is the, you know, the data and logic, the stories, and then what other people are doing. Going back to logos, ethos, pathos. So that's my 2 cents, is probably structure an argument using those 3 things.
And this actually, there's some good questions coming in from our audience. I want to make sure we save some time for that. And one of them, it was here, or just, you know, looking for some attribution examples. And in addition to some of these great ones that Nick and Tyler mentioned, let me just mention a couple that, you know, that I think that my clients are doing that I think are super effective in bringing to not the C-suite, but the C-level executives, I guess, if we use that term instead. But the, you know, because we know what they care about, right? And so like here's an example. In addition to being able to say, like, here's the top 10 opportunities that we had influence, we could show things like, you know, what percentage of the current open pipeline has had customer influence or not had customer influence, or what is the average sales cycle in length of opportunities that are closed deals where customer advocacy was applied versus where it wasn't. And so now you can actually prove once and for all that customer advocacy actually shortens sales cycles. Or same thing with average deal size. I mean, because theoretically, if you're bringing advocacy in, you're proving value, you're removing doubt, you're probably going to reduce the amount of negotiation or discount requests you're getting, or increasing the amount of upsell you're doing in the original deal. And so being able to do those things is just solid gold for this. And I think this also ties into another question, which was like, how do you motivate, or, you know, do you use a carrot or stick to get the salespeople to record these things? Well, my answer to that is, don't ask the salespeople to record these things. You know, you instrument it such that, you know, let's say the reference request comes in and it gets fulfilled. You know, you use your customer marketing platform to automatically apply that to the opportunity to associate that influence event, so that you can then use Salesforce, because I guess 98% of us are using Salesforce, right? But then you could roll up on the opportunity all this data, including stage movement data, as Nick is referring to, as well as deal outcome data, because Salesforce tracks all that beautifully. All you really need to do is associate and automate the association of these influence events with the opportunity and the stage movement. And when I say influence events, think about it. It could be a customer fulfilled a reference request. It could be a customer hosted a site visit, which happens with some of my dealers, like in the car automotive industry, right? The site visits are crucial to buying that type of software. It could be that they joined a group customer reference webinar, which a lot of companies are doing right now. Or it could be that amazing customer content that you have created was shared by a sales rep to help an opportunity move along. Track that. That is actually influence that the customer marketer has had, that some of this packaged content that they've created has been used in the sales cycle. So like, again, the more that you require a sales rep to have to key this stuff in, it won't happen. You know, don't even, you're just going to always be banging your head.
And I definitely agree, and I'd expand that to each of the team members, the customer marketing person, the CSM. You know, back to this idea of like how CSMs feel less protective. It's when they're aware things are happening. But if that requires the customer marketer to Slack, email, talk to every CSM every time, that's going to be prohibitive too. So your systems have to help your teams have a more orchestrated experience. So I'll give an example at Gainsight. When the customer marketing team reaches out, they log the entry and timeline. That's where CSMs go to see what's the history of engagement. So we don't need to alert the CSM every time, but they know to go look at timeline, and then they have a sense of it, and then they feel okay because they understand that they have awareness.
Right. So let me just ask anybody, if you want to ask a question, you can either type it into the chat, or if you're really bold, just raise your hand in the chat and you can unmute yourself and ask it directly, since we're on a webinar. I mean, Zoom meeting here, not a webinar. So, but we want to make sure we're addressing your questions. So please ask them away. While we're waiting for a few more to come in,
I'd love to build on Andrew's comment.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, perfect.
If you don't mind. Yeah, Andrew, perfect. I think that's a great point, and a very tactical thing that you can focus on here is when your advocates move to a new company. So you have an advocate, they love what you're doing, they move to a new company, they're not a customer. How do you quickly understand that? Gainsight has the ability to see when a LinkedIn profile changes. So when a promoter changes their LinkedIn profile, that's a cue for customer marketing and sales to say, this is somebody we should reconnect with or follow up with.
And how are you doing that, Tyler? Have you systematized that or put a program around that?
We do. So we have one of the features of Gainsight is called sponsor tracking, and it looks at LinkedIn profile data, and then will proactively alert us to say, hey, Steve was a promoter at this company. He's now at a different company. Oh, they're not a customer. That becomes an interesting lead for sales and customer marketing.
Interesting, yeah.
Andrew, can you, you've had some interesting comments actually in the thread here. Can you, you want to get on and chat with us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Tyler, love that example. But what I was thinking, and I agree with you 100% that we build these relationships with the people, not necessarily with the company they work with. And so we're tracking them. We become LinkedIn connections, and I can see, like you can in Gainsight, when they've moved from one company to another, and that triggers certain actions to be taken where I can inform my sales team, my marketing team, that we have an embedded advocate, the existing software application that they're using, we could disrupt that and replace it. But what I was thinking is actually, we're actually sourcing leads for our demand gen team, right? We bought our profile on G2, and on that profile, we have links to forms, right? And so as our prospects are filling out those forms, those leads get automatically sent to an SDR, they get automatically MQL'd, and the lead source is G2. And my purview, my charter is G2. So the lead source is not from attending a webinar or going to a conference or whatever it might be, it's G2. And so what I'm looking to do is not only pay for my programs, but contribute to the annual revenue, the ARR that's coming out of my advocacy program. Does that make sense?
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're a revenue source there, Andrew, right? You're not a cost center.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I think that's really, we get the alerts too, but we don't have it tracked that way. So actually that's a good idea for us. One thing I was going to add in, since I know there's, we're getting towards the end, I think that one other concept to consider is that advocacy is not a binary thing for a customer. It's not like either they're an advocate or not. They could be an advocate in certain situations. They can articulate certain things well about your product. They're not as good about other things. They can explain the ROI well, or they can't. They use certain features or they don't. They're a really good speaker or they're not. And so one of the things I think that you can do to really add more value is get people the right advocate for a specific type of situation. This is easier said than done because obviously there's so many parameters then. But to me, that's where partnering with the sales team to understand what are the scenarios that come up proactively, not reactively. Reactively is, hey, does anyone know a reference that's somebody that's used this feature in Kansas, and went on board in the last year, right? That's the reactive. You all deal with that. But could you proactively go with your sales enablement team and say, what are the 5 most common scenarios we're running into, right? Like I said, in Gainsight, it would be data readiness, new CS executive not knowing where to start, scaling to the long tail, whatever. And how do you then have like a really well-defined pool of strategies through customer marketing for the common sales scenario? So work backwards from the sales process.
I'm going to put somebody else on the spot here who I know is not shy. Allison Bukowski, you talk about, related to this topic, you talk about the choose your own adventure strategy. Could I convince you to come off mute and just tell us all a little bit about your philosophy there around choose your own adventure?
I was always the kid in school that got called on when I didn't bother to raise my hand, but sure. It's when I talk to customers, when I'm walking them through, our advocacy program. And Nick, kind of to your point about you have to find the right advocate for the right opportunity. So I even describe it. If you guys remember those choose your own adventure novels, when you were a kid.
I love those.
Well, and I tell customers, this isn't about, hey, we need a case study. We're not going to confine you to that. There's opportunities for you. It's not favors, it's opportunities. It's sure. Do you like speaking? We'd love to partner with you. If that's not your thing, would you spend 15 minutes just talking to us about your experience? Would you grab half an hour with our CEO, our product team? What are they most interested in? Because that's really how you drive outcomes from, if you're not passionate about it or you're not interested in it, there's no point to really engage the customer in it. So, and it's selfish as well, because once you got into those choose your own adventure novels, you get deeper and deeper into the story. So, okay, I'll sit with you for 15 minutes. 2 months later, as you're on this journey or this story, well, they're comfortable. You've established a rapport and a relationship, and all of a sudden they're speaking with me on stage, at an industry event. So it's something that I just am very upfront with customers. I've built this program for you to have multiple opportunities. You tell me what you're most interested in. So
that's a great point, Allison. And it's like talking, guess what? It's like talking to the, okay, we're not using C-suite, but to the executive suite, to your CEO, to your C-levels. It's the same principle. It's a human principle. You start to persuade somebody, you start with their interest. That's where you start. So you're doing that with your customer advocates and potential advocates, and you should also be doing that with your senior leaders as well.
Yeah.
And the point is, one of the major points from the roundtable is you can sit down with your CEO and make a compelling case for funding and supporting and so forth your programs. Absolutely, and we're working on resources to help you all do that.
And Bill, I'll just say, in some of the tools that that we're using, Gainsight and soon to be Slap 5, but being able to capture those preferences actually lets me go to leadership. And I too, C-suite or not C-suite, right? Depending where you sit in an organization, but advocacy is connective tissue, marketing, sales, product, customer success. I can go to them then by capturing those preferences and say, this is actually what the customers want to do. We need to be restructuring. Marketing tells me they want case studies. It's not what customers want. So that data has been very helpful as well. When I have those conversations and just ask customers, what do you want?
That's hugely powerful.
Right.
That's hugely so powerful.
Right. And I just want to build on Nick's point and give an example of it around, advocacy is not a binary thing. Because when I was at Forrester and I built the Forrester Frontlines Global Customer Engagement Program and Voice Program, we weren't even using the term advocacy, because these people that were customers that were members of this, they weren't considering themselves advocates. It was just a customer engagement program. We referred to it internally, and then externally, we just called it Forrester Frontlines. This is an opportunity for you to be on the front lines of your industry. And we had the menu of, we offered each one of them a list of options that they could pick and choose of activity types that they could be a part of. And then we would tailor every offer or opportunity that we would put out there to those that had already raised their hand and said, we like to do that type of thing. But as several people have said, some people love public speaking, some hate it. Some love just giving product feedback, and some would rather not. Some love networking with peers, but don't want to have a public voice. And so there's value to all of those people to be part of your engagement program. And so I'm always telling people, don't just think of your advocacy program as that top 2% of your raving lunatic fans. Think about engaging all customers, because all of them need to adopt, all of them need to expand, all of them need to renew, right? And so all of them should be engaged. But how do you do that at scale? How do you do that at scale? That's the topic for our next webinar. But I know that's the common question I get. But let me just, why don't we just see if there's any parting thoughts from our panel here today, because I don't think there's any questions we didn't address, but, and we have 2 minutes left. Nick, you just wrote a comment that you learned so much. What's one of the things you learned?
I learned
Interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I loved, I think it was it Amanda who was speaking? Was it Amanda?
Or Allison?
Allison, sorry, I'm sorry, Allison. Yeah, Allison, your comments were really just spot on and just very, very actionable. Everyone just had great ideas, and it's like anything, you kind of go to an event and you think more about that, and you're like, we should be doing more of this. Luckily, we got Tyler here who's making all this happen. So I think I just gained even more respect for just the incredible number of ways that this type of community could help the shared goal of, you know, growth and adoption and all that stuff. And then just my takeaway for you all is I think this is intimately tied to customer success, and customer success is clearly exploding. Customer marketing is absolutely going to be on the same path. So excited for all of you and your careers.
Tyler, you want a key takeaway or key point you want to reinforce?
Yeah, I'll come at it from the bottom up angle of, I actually do this, and similar to customer success, you start small, you start with experiments, you think about that metric and you work backwards to say, how do we measure it? Let's run it a couple times, and then you build from there. It can feel really overwhelming to think of the whole system you have to build. And so it's similar to how we have developed as a CS org and our guidance to CSMs. You start small and build from there. Don't try to tackle the full system at once.
Right.
Awesome.
Bill, any key points you want to wrap up with here?
I liked logos, ethos, and pathos. I love that. I think Allison gave us a very good illustration of how being the conduit for the voice of the customer through their stories to your C-suite, super powerful, great observation.
Well, why don't we wrap up here then? I want to thank you, everybody. Nick had to drop, but thank you, Nick. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. And keep an eye out. We are going to send you a little survey over the next couple of days that's going to lead to this research project we're doing that's going to bring even more data-driven insight into this topic that we talked about today. So thank you, everybody. And we'd also love your feedback. We'll just ask a question to get some feedback on the session as well.